Well, thank you so much for having me. I know we're running slightly late, so I'll definitely do my best to stay on time and maybe give you some time back. My name is Mauro Cozzi. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of EmitWise. And today I thought in a sea of presentations about different companies and approaches, I'd take the opportunity instead of to tell you about us and what we do too much, rather to tell you about some tools for how you can help all of the businesses in your life, whether you are an investor, a customer, or you run a business or you're a part of a business, to help them get to net zero and help accelerate the transition towards a world that stays within this very important 1.5 degree mark. What I will say very briefly is, as mentioned by Lubomila just now on stage, there are indeed a lot of us carbon management startups, and I think that's so fantastic. I think it's one of the most sort of needed tools in the world. I'm very happy to tell you a little bit about EmitWise after this presentation. You'll get my email shortly thereafter. I think what you should know about us is that we're a company that brings the Silicon Valley sort of disruptor DNA to this field of helping the entire world decarbonize. We are really focused on how do we help every business in the world cut their carbon footprint. Specifically in a world of ESG, we're very focused on the E side, and on how do we enable day-to-day decision making to be led by carbon as a KPI, just as much as businesses have been using cost as a KPI. We're backed by top tier Silicon Valley investors like True Ventures and a few new names that will soon be disclosed to the public. And we're really privileged and feel honored to be a part of this journey that the world is undergoing to fight the worst of climate catastrophe. Now, with that, I wanted to start with a bit of a backdrop to remind ourselves that currently our world is on track for 2.4 degrees of warming. And really what that means, and I think it's really important to remind ourselves, especially in these contexts, these conferences where we're constantly talking about solutions, to remind ourselves what is the nature of the problem. And this is a very human problem. 2.4 degrees means massive refugee crises. It means millions of people displaced from their homes, hundreds of thousands of deaths, the destruction of the natural habitats which frankly, in my opinion, make our world the beautiful place that it is to live today. And I always say, as many say, the planet will survive, but it's humans that will suffer. It's a very, very real problem, and the reason why all of us here at EmitWise are so passionate about addressing it. And this problem really boils down to something, as Sir David Attenborough said very eloquently, in his own words, it is easy to forget that ultimately the climate emergency comes down to a single number, and that is the concentration of carbon in our atmosphere. So as I mentioned, at EmitWise, we're entirely focused on creating a technology, a software solution to help the biggest and most complex businesses in the world cut down the amount of carbon that they're pumping out into the atmosphere, so that we can continue living our best lives as a humanity. So today I'm going to present to you extremely quickly a very short version of a presentation that I run for C-suite leaders at some of the biggest and most complex enterprises of the world, called 7 Solutions to Get Us to 1.5. And if you're interested in the long version of this presentation, I'll give you my email at the end. The very first solution is all about stakeholder engagement and education. For us, we want every single person at every business in the world to be thinking about carbon, from marketing to product development to even accounting, all of the back of the house and front of the house functions, to be thinking about how can they be engaged in helping the wider organization meet net zero, and how can they do it in a way that is profitable and helps drive both bottom line and top line growth. And I've listed here on the slides a couple of examples, and you'll see throughout my slides, you'll see examples of companies that have done a really great job at implementing these kinds of solutions, so that you can come back and check it out after my presentation. The second solution is all about having science-based climate commitments and reporting, and especially in a world where in the last couple of years, we've seen so many, literally thousands of businesses come out and say, I'm going to be net zero. It is so important and critical that we ask the question, what does that mean? Right? We want to ensure that when our businesses, our communities, our cities, the countries that we live in are making commitments, that they are aligned with scientifically based targets that will actually get us to avoid the worst of climate change. At EmitWise, we are huge fans of the Science Based Targets Initiative. We are an accredited partner of the CDP, which works very closely with the Science Based Targets Initiative. And we love the new net zero standard, which they have recently published. So we really encourage every business in the world to pick up the standard and put it into action. Solution number 3 is all about supplier engagement and education. Indeed, supply chain emissions are a huge hot topic. Scope 3 is very complex, very complicated, and it's a bit of a minefield, and everybody's starting to figure it out. Now, what we've discovered is that certainly the bulk of emissions for most carbon intensive businesses like manufacturers, like retailers and hospitality is embedded in their supply chain. And so it's extremely important that in particularly the large and influential businesses in the world jump in and support those suppliers, educate them, give them financing and other sort of vehicles and toolkits in order to help that supply chain transition to a net zero world as well. Solution number 4 is all about collective action. And you start to see a pattern in all of these solutions. They do require collaboration in one way or another. One of the things that I most love about sustainability is that it's one of those fields where you generally see peers that would otherwise be seen as competitors coming together, sitting around the same table to discuss what are we going to do together about our carbon footprint, our environmental impact, about climate change. Those consortiums include, some of the policymakers, some of the academic institutions, but crucially, these businesses that traditionally compete, but all of a sudden realize that in order to meet these shared objectives of climate reduction targets, they must work together, exchange ideas, exchange data, and frankly, just exchange support, be peers in each other's journeys. Solution number 5 is back to suppliers and procurement. One of the things that matters the most, where we are lacking the most data right now, is exactly about that supply chain piece. With EmitWise, we post to the world that the same way that we've been thinking about ESG more broadly and perhaps about the KYC side of working with your suppliers, we now need to start thinking about that from a carbon point of view. We need to start asking the question, what is the carbon footprint of the thing that I am buying? And that requires both action from all of the suppliers of the world, which all of our businesses are, as well as us as our own businesses. For example, at EmitWise, we have a sustainable supply chain policy, and it makes us question ourselves, even as a small and growing startup, what kinds of companies do we want to be buying from? Everything from our laptops to the offices that we sit in. Solution number 6, the penultimate solution, is all about embedding sustainability in the development of the products that we put out to the world as businesses. Now, for some of the physical product manufacturers of the world, like Apple or Allbirds, the shoe company, this is a very tangible problem. And it's not just about the embedded carbon footprint of the materials that were utilized to create a product, for example, but it's also about the use of that product. For example, the energy that an iPhone uses every time that we plug it into a wall. But we shouldn't stop there. At EmitWise, we really encourage that we should all really scrutinize what is a product that we are selling, even if you're a services business. In our case, we think about how we build our software. At EmitWise, we use a lot of machine learning. We use big data solutions, and that can be a very carbon intensive endeavor. So we think about things down to what is a programming language that we're writing our software in that is going to mean that it's the most carbon efficient or energy efficient software that we could possibly have. And the very final solution is actually something that we think that people don't talk about enough, which is all around diversity and the innovation that diversity invites. At EmitWise, we have a massive commitment to the diversity of our team, of our investors, of every stakeholder that engages with EmitWise. We think diversity is not just a business nice to have, but rather a must have that drives diversity of thought, diversity of solutions. And with such a massive and complex problem like climate change, we need every opinion to come to the table. The good news for all the numbers obsessed people in the crowd is that time and time again, studies have shown that bringing diversity to your team and putting a focus on prioritizing innovation leads to higher profitability over time. And we see it as a key pillar of driving climate action. So as a reminder, climate change is a massive human problem. The world is currently on track for 2.5 degrees, but we have solutions on the table to fight this huge problem. Today, I've presented 7 solutions to get us closer to 1.5. If you want a copy of this presentation of the longer version, I'm happy to share it. My name is Mauro at EmitWise.com, and I am very happy and feel privileged to have had the opportunity to speak to all of you today. Thank you very much.